Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Friday. Happy Friday today, first of all. It was a rough week in the financial markets. But it was a good week in the interest rates. I mean, if you're looking to buy a house and you're in contract or you're getting pre-approved right now, from what I see right now, this is a great time. We hit below 4% on the 10-year yields this week. And we have a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. We'll go over interest rates, the rate cuts that are coming up, the Fed's ending QT, which is quantitative tightening. We'll talk about the trade tensions between the US and China, and we'll see what we have to look forward to in the coming week. So again, happy Friday. Let's get into it. Let's start with the interest rates. So this week, today we ended the 10-year yield at 4.014%. But we did see a break below 4. I believe it was yesterday we saw a break below 4%. And that kind of is signaling. But the rate still stayed, give or take, around the 6.23. Here, I'll pull this up. Let's look at today's mortgage rates instead. So 30-year fix still stayed around 6.23%. And that's where it hovered throughout the whole week, 6.23, 6.4. give or take. So still, if you don't necessarily need to lock your rate right now, like if you're not closing next week, you're going to be closing in a week or 2 weeks plus actually, then you're better off waiting it out, because I think you should be able to get a much better rate going forward, probably give or take like around the 6%, or even, and if you get lucky, maybe even below, you might be able to score 5.8, 5.9. But definitely FHA right now, I mean, these are conventional rates that you see on the screen over here. 6.23 for 30-year, 15 years always lower, it's 5.8. But FHA, you see 30-year, you're already at 5.99. So give or take in about 2 weeks or so, you should be able to see FHA rates around the 5.8, 5.75% range. And if you are getting an FHA loan, it might be worth it to just wait it out just another week or two, and we get that rate cut on October 28th. So far, it's looking like it's a 1/4 point cut, but fingers crossed, maybe it's a 1/2 point cut. There's a lot of stuff floating around with different articles, different people that are close to the Fed chair, and just news coming out of the Fed department itself as well that they're exploring 1/2 point. So who knows? But we know for sure 1/4 point is on board. They're gonna cut. They've said it at least 2 to 3 times more this year. That doesn't mean you should wait every single time, because remember, when they cut the rate at the Fed level, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the rate for the mortgages. So when the Fed cuts the rate, the banks borrow on that rate. So for example, if today the 10-year fix is at 4.01%, that means Chase Bank will go in and they'll borrow $1 billion or $3 billion from the federal government and say, hey, give us this money. The federal government would lend it to them at that price, at that interest rate. And then they put what's called a spread. And the spread is, you can call it a profit margin for the bank on top of the Fed rate. And then they give it out to the consumer as a loan. So if the spread is, let's say, 200 basis points, then you'll add that on to the 4. So 200 basis points is just 2%. And you'll add that on to the 4, that becomes 6, and then that's what they give out. So right now we had a big issue the last year and a half, was because of so the more volatility there is, and because the volatility was so high the last year and a half, the rates were just like up and down, up and down. So the banks don't know where to lock in their spreads, because it's not going to be feasible for them to have their spread low today, but then by the time you go close your loan, it's much higher. The rate is higher now. They're not making enough, and you've already locked in. So what they kind of did was they just increased the spreads across the board, and that's what really kept the mortgage rates high, was the spreads. And to bring those spreads down, the banks need some type of assurance from the government. They need to not have these rates bounce up and down so drastically. Like, if it's coming down, it should come down and it should hold steady. Then the spreads will start to get normalized. Like, we're already seeing it now happen. That's why we see these interest rates at 6.23%, because last year was very similar. Last year actually, the 10-year was very similar. It was lower in the 4s. And let's take a look right here. We'll see it right here where the last year's rates were at. So if we go to this chart and we put 1 year. So last year, see, we were right there at 4.2, but the interest rate last year was more like 6.5, 6.7% at this time. So that's because the spread was so high. So we are coming down on the spreads, which is going to help get these mortgage rates that the consumer gets in front much lower. So we should be able to break, I'm hoping, from what I'm looking at and the way I understand this data, we should be able to break the 6% barrier for interest rates and hold it at the high fives by the end of the year. So don't believe all this nonsense that they write online that you're going to see 4%, 3% this year. I mean, in order to see that, there has to be something crazy, drastic that needs to happen. But I don't see that happening. And I think we're going to see probably the rates stabilize around the high fives, like 5.8, 5.7, 5.9. And then, you can buy down your rate if you want. If you know that, hey, you know what, this is the first one and done, I'm going to get this loan and I'm going to knock it out 5.5, 5.3, whatever, I'll buy it down and do it. However, I don't think you should. I think you should just take whatever loan you're getting right now, pay as less points as possible as you can. And if that mortgage payment makes sense, close the loan, and then you'll have a chance to refinance this loan within the next 24 months. I have a very high conviction that in the next 24 months, you should be able to lower this mortgage payment down, and it should break 5% and low. So you should be able to secure a 4.5 or a high 4% interest rate, which again is normal. So pre-COVID, before all these 2.5, 3, 3.5% interest rates came to be, and because everybody's seen it, they're just like, oh, we want that, we want it again. But you need to understand that around the fours, mid fours to high fours, anywhere between 4 and 5% is the sweet spot for interest rates. That gives you a good balance between principal and interest. You're buying a house with 20% down. That'll give you a decent payment, and you just have to work those numbers out. And if you're looking to buy, and my main point that I always make to all my clients when I'm helping them look for properties is you want to make sure that you've done your homework. And I sit down and I do this with my clients and we run the numbers. We run estimate mortgage payments depending on the area with taxes, insurance, PMIs, whatever they might have. So we get a ballpark number and we figure all this stuff out beforehand that, hey, you might be pre-approved for $1 million on a house, but can you realistically afford that? I mean, your documents, because remember, they use pre-tax income, but you're paying your mortgage payment with post-tax income, and post-deductions. So you want to make so it's two different stories. The bank might be approving you based off of your pre-tax, pre-deduction and saying, hey, you can qualify for this much. But that's not what you're bringing home. You're bringing home after taxes, after deductions. This is what I'm left with after the money goes to my 401k and after it goes to my for my other insurance or whatever it is. This is what I'm bringing home. And that's what I work with my clients and make sure that they can afford a house. They're not going to shoot themselves in the foot with a payment that they can't afford 6 months down the road and be stuck in a terrible position. So that's what you should do. You should do your homework, make sure the property you're purchasing makes sense, the numbers make sense. And if it's something that you have to get a little bit smaller for now, like a house, you have to get a little bit smaller for now, or you need to go out maybe 20 minutes out of the area that you really want to be in, or 15 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it might be, that sacrifice you're going to make is going to be better than you buying something that's and you're like living paycheck to paycheck and every single dollar is just going to paying a mortgage, and it's just going to get frustrating after a while. So be careful with that. And then, yeah, but interest rates wise, just if you have the time, I think you should wait it out especially until these rate cuts kick in, which is on the 28th. 28th or 29th is when the Fed's going to meet and they'll announce the rate cut. Let that kick in. They already did one rate cut in September and nothing changed. The rates were actually lower prior to the rate cut, and then the rates jumped up, which was normal. That always happens. So as far as you can go back, whenever they did a rate cut, the mortgage rates actually went up. They didn't go down after the Fed cut the rate, because it takes some time for all of that volatility, everything to stabilize, like I'm saying, those spreads to stabilize and stuff. But by the time we get this next rate cut, we should definitely see that effect already happening, and we'll start seeing these rates come down. November and December, I think, are going to be a great opportunity for buyers to buy homes, which leads me right into what's going on today with the housing market. We're sitting on an average of 4.5 months of supply, which is actually pretty healthy. It's not that we have too many homes on the, well, it depends on the region actually, because a lot of the Central America and these states that were overbought basically out of remote, because everybody was working remote during the pandemic, and everybody had two sources of income and stuff like that. And then they went out and bought houses in the middle of nowhere. And then once those jobs started to ask them to come back into the office and everything would start to normalize, they realized, oh no, we can't live here anymore. Or maybe they realized that 3 months, 6 months in, I've had clients, I've had stories and clients that moved back to New York City because they realized, okay, we thought it was going to be all happy and dandy, but driving 45 minutes to get coffee, or the hospital's an hour away or stuff like that. You just, when you're living in the city and everything's just within walking distance, 10, 15, 5 minutes away, it's very hard to adjust to another lifestyle where things are, an hour away, 100 miles, 80 miles away and stuff. So a lot of those states are getting hit, and those markets are getting hit, and those prices are coming down drastically. In some areas, actually, you have, let's search up, let me see if I can find a map over here that can show us. Let's see if we can find something that can show us where these homes are dropping the most. Okay, so I got this one, these 96 counties. Here we go. I'm going to share this. Let's check this out right here. So I'm on Resi Club Analytics, and here we go. So we have in Punta Gorda, Florida, is the highest appreciated houses right now that are taking cuts. Home prices are falling, yeah, and majority, you can see Florida, Texas, Arizona. So all of these were like, a lot of these areas were cities that people fled from big cities from, and because they wanted the backyard, they wanted the house, and everything looked good. But then when they got there, it just didn't, one thing or another, it just didn't end up working out. So we have all this, we have all of those home prices going down, but then you also have areas like New York City and some other major metropolitan areas where the house prices are still holding strong. I mean, we haven't seen anything crazy happen with the prices here. Yeah, you can still definitely get a deal. So whatever is listed, remember, when the house price is listed, that's the suggested price. That's not really the end price. You can go in, you can negotiate. Definitely have a professional with you that knows what they're doing, that has been doing it for a while and has done many transactions, and they can help you negotiate. Our average over here at Suits Realty in my brokerage, we help clients save anywhere between 3 to 10% on a home purchase in total. So that might not just be on the, from the listed price of the house, but in total, meaning during inspections, getting repairs done, whatever it is, throughout the whole process, our clients end up saving anywhere as a buyer 3 to 10% on a home. So something could be listed at $700,000, but by the time they're closing, let's say they saved 5%, they saved $35,000 on that home, which is a lot of money for a first-time buyer, or a lot of money for anybody. Even if you're buying a second or third home, you want to try to squeeze as much as you can, and especially if we're representing you as your agents or your broker on the buyer side, then that's our due diligence. That's our job to do, is to just make sure you get the best deal possible. And that's what you can expect in New York City right now, especially. So if there's a house, or anywhere, wherever you are across the country, if you see a house for sale and you're looking to purchase it, make sure you negotiate. Make sure you know your numbers. Make sure you have a professional by your side that knows construction, that knows what the home inspector needs to look for, and has a team that's ready, built out for you, so you have less stress on your head, and you're not over there looking on Yelp and Google and asking 100 different people for a home inspector, an attorney, and this and that. The best thing to do is to just find someone, a real estate professional that has his or her whole team put together, and they can just go ahead and guide you throughout the whole process. And that's what we do here at Truth Realty. And, we guide everybody, and we have a team put together, and that's how we make things happen very quickly also. So we don't waste any time. So yeah, you can definitely, even in these areas where the house prices are dropping, the biggest reason they're dropping is, because those houses weren't worth that much to begin with. It was just in the moment. It was a FOMO effect going on with the public, and everybody just started dropping money on houses in areas that was selling houses for $150,000, $200,000, ended up in 6 months selling at $500,000, $600,000, 2x, 3x the amount. And people were still buying, and banks were lending, which made no sense whatsoever. So, and those are the areas that you're seeing first get hit with these price cuts, like drastically, and also the inventory is up like crazy in those areas. So right now, if you are looking in those neighborhoods, you can get a great deal on those in those neighborhoods and in those areas. And like I said, I'll put it up one more time. I'll show you one more time. It's right here. So we got Florida, Punta Gorda, Florida, Cape Coral in Florida, Northport, Naples, Austin Round, Texas, Tampa, Florida. So these areas, and again, you can go to Resi Club Analytics. You can just Google this up, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So if you're in any of these areas and you're looking to purchase a property, you can definitely score a very good deal, because the entire blocks are up for sale right now. And then we had another piece of information about investors. So this one, we have investor activity hits 5-year high, signaling recovery. Investors snapped up 345,000 homes in quarter 2 of 2025, the most in 5 years. Per recent data, commercial activity surged to a 2025 record in September. So look, if investors are, and majority of these investors are mom and pop, so they own less than, each investor owns less than 5 properties. That's what a mom and pop investor is. And if they're buying it up, that means they see the value, that they see that rates coming down, inventory is eventually going to shrink, and they understand how these numbers are working on real estate properties. And remember, real estate is not a short-term hold. They're not buying it because they're going to sell it back to the market next year and double their money. That's not the way real estate works. I assure you, 99% chance that you will lose money if you try to buy a property and sell it the next day. So real estate is a long-term hold. So if these investors are buying, they're not looking at where this property value is going to be next year. They're looking at 5-10 years from now. They're not looking into just the next 12 months. So, but that tells you that there's very good deals out there. Investors are snatching up properties where the consumers are basically backing off on. So if you are within the next 12 months, you think you're going to be buying, you should honestly actively start within the next 60 days. At least start to entertain the idea and start to begin your documentation, whatever you need to do, get pre-approved, and start exploring the market, start sending out offers, go look at homes. So if you're looking to buy within the next 12 months, the time to start would be within the next 2 months, is to start your process. So this way you could be a homeowner within the next 12 months. And the investors usually are the signal, because if they're snatching up homes, that means that, it's the interest rates is just secondary. You got to make sure, as a consumer and as an investor, investors most likely, they pay cash, they get hard money loans, they get all these different creative financing. But as a consumer, as a homeowner buying your home first time or primary residency, you want to make sure that that payment makes sense. So whatever that payment is coming out, make sure it makes sense. I always go back to this because it is very crucial. Don't overextend your paycheck. Don't live paycheck to paycheck, because one bad storm and your roof collapses, or something happens, or your hot water gives out, or your furnace gives out and you need to get it replaced, can drain your wallet. So be very mindful of that stuff. But that's where interest rates are. And I think, I honestly think going forward, interest rates are going to come down lower. Like I said, let's wait for that rate cut to happen on the 28th, 29th, give or take around that time. And I believe you'll start seeing some great deals come on the market, and your loan officer should be able to give you some great deals on the interest rates coming up. All right. Next, we also saw last week, Friday was kind of crazy. I mean, we saw the stock market tank, completely took a a big dive, but it wasn't that crazy as what we saw in April. So in April, we saw this, the S&P 500 dump about 2%. This time we saw it about 3%. But then over the weekend, last weekend into this Monday, it recovered a whole 1% back. And once it recovered, it was like all the noise was gone from that Friday, and it was just a bunch of panic going on in the market, which is normal for October. If you do some research, you'll see October is just high volatility month, and it has this. It's gonna happen. We just didn't know how much, but now that we saw that, how much it came down, a lot of people panicked and sold. The algos sold. A lot of investors sold their holding, and it just kept going down. But this week we saw it kind of stabilize from the beginning of the week to the end of the week. If you look at the S&P 500 and you look at, even if you have portfolios, look at it. If you were holding good stocks and you had good companies that you were investing in, it pretty much ended even. It didn't really move too much up and down. So the volatility, but throughout the week was very high. It was up in the morning, back down in the afternoon, and then after market was crazy. Like earlier this morning at 4 a.m., 3 a.m., the market again took a huge dump and then just came right back by the time market opened, and then stabilized and closed out flat basically for the week. So it's definitely a roller coaster this week, and I expect it to continue for next week as well going in. So just be mindful of that. Know that, okay, we're going to have a bumpy road for at least another 2 weeks. And then I think we'll just start seeing some recovery come in back to where we were prior to October, and we'll see those numbers back. So just keep your eye on that, and just make sure you guys don't just end up making decisions that you're going to regret in 2 weeks or 3 weeks time. And last but not least, let's talk about the the trade tensions between U.S. and China. This was a big thing, and this is what really set it off last week, Friday, was the fact that President Trump said that we're going to tariff China, and then it was blown out of proportion, and that's the reason it started to come down. But realistically, that was already on the table, that those tariffs were going to hit China, I believe, November 7th or November 10th, as it was. So for him to just bring it back up and say that they're going to be with the minerals, they're going to be tariffing the minerals, and they're not going to give it out to the countries, or they're going to have oversight on it. It just blew it out of proportion, and then it got so many misunderstandings happened, and that's why the market started to just take a big dive. And then they try to walk it back over the weekend. They were walking it back throughout this whole week. You had Vice President J.D. Vance, you had Bassett out there, you had President Trump out there, messaging, even his son Eric Trump, tweeting it out, trying to walk all of that back and say, hey, the relationships are fine. The market shouldn't overreact like the way they did, and everything will be fine. They're meeting on November 1st, and they'll work out a trade deal. So again, it was an overreaction. They're trying to stabilize it, but I think the market at this point is just too spooked to just say, okay, you know what, let's put all the gains back into the market as it was before. So I think they're going to wait it out to see what happens on November 1st, and then we'll see some type of recovery start to form after that. So don't pay too much attention to that, because it's just a lot of noise in the air that you just need to ignore, especially if you're an investor and you do hold investments and stuff. You need to just hold it, ride it through, hold strong. It's a bunch of noise. You want to ignore it. You want to let them work out their disputes, even though realistically there is no dispute between that they need to work out, because everything was already pre-planned. The meetings, the tariffs, everything was already on the books, and just bringing it back up just caused extra fear and overreaction from the market. And last but not least, the Fed is going to be easing on the QT, which means quantitative tightening. So since they started raising the rates, they were really tightening in on their holdings and making sure that they had control over the yields, and that the inflation wouldn't just get out of hand. And now they're seeing that the inflation is back under control. They're happy with the unemployment rate. They're happy with all the markers that they're looking at in order to determine that rate cuts are justifiable. So now they're saying we're going to start easing out of QT, which just means that they're going to print more money. That's what I mean. So things might be getting more expensive going forward, because that's what we saw even during COVID, 2020, 2021. The printer machine was on Fed. Things started to pop up. Things were getting more expensive. More money was available to the public, and to banks all around. There was just more money available that drove up prices. So look out for this. We might be seeing more of this coming forward. Again, I don't think we're going to see any of this anytime soon within the next week. This is probably going to be 2-3 weeks out from now. So we'll keep an eye on this, and we'll talk about this on following videos and see where the Fed goes with this. Drop me a comment if you have any questions, or if you want me to talk about anything else on the next one. But that's about it for today. And it was great catching up with you guys. Have a great weekend. Don't pay too much attention to the noise in the markets. And keep an eye on the 10-year yield. It looks like we're going to be dropping below 4 next week and going into the rate cut. And then we should have a nice pop in November and December coming forward. And if you're looking for a property, this will be a great time to start searching. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you on the next one.